Hi everyone, Phil Hayes-Brown here and welcome to Exploring Inclusion. Sport is huge in Australia, as we all know, and you're going to find out today what Prince Harry has to do with wheelchair footy. Our special guest this week is Richard Amon, the CEO of Disability Sports and Rec, and he's going to share the answer on Prince Harry and many other things about sports, disability and inclusion. Stay tuned.
Don't wait for tomorrow. Live for today. Keep chasing the sunshine and go out and play.
Right, hi everybody, welcome back. Richard, welcome to Willara TV and Exploring Inclusion.
Hi Phil, thanks for having me.
Good, and you've met the guys working on the team today. Ben's over there switching angles and Jay, so it's a pretty good setup, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Good stuff. All right, well, we all love sport and we're delighted to have you with us today to sort of help us understand the issues around disability, sport, and especially inclusion, which is the name of this show, because there's lots of different paths, we think, to inclusion. It's good to understand people like you who are working in that space. So we're going to talk about disability, sports and rec, but let's start with your journey to this role. Give us a bit of context.
Well, very quickly, I started off studying chemical engineering.
Okay.
And found that didn't really have a great drive and purpose in what the outcomes for that was going to be, so I failed it pretty badly after being a pretty talented student. So I eventually discovered sports science and wanted to be an elite sports scientist, and I graduated with distinction and graduate of the year, and it was all guns blazing, this is going to be fantastic, but I didn't really feel the outcomes of elite sport was really what drove me, and got involved with community sport, with leisure centres, was involved at Melbourne University Sport for 10 years, helping to run their students and staff sporting programs and leisure programs. And then a couple of years of consulting, and then 10 years at City of Casey trying to drive health outcomes for that community through sport and recreation. And we had a couple of disability programs that we were running at City of Casey, and through that, when the opportunity came up to apply for the CEO's role at Disability Sport and Rec, I thought, wow, that's a new challenge, love to get involved with that, and really just driven by the passion about helping people reach their potential. So that's where I've been the last 3.5 years.
Sounds like a good pathway to your current role. So let's talk about Disability Sports and Rec, DSR. You've been there 3.5 years. For the viewers out there, and by the way, I should mention, send us in your questions, do all those social media things, and we'll interrupt this as questions come in and put you on the spot with some tough questions from the viewers, Richard.
Okay.
So DSR, tell us, what are the things you're working on now? Tell us for the viewers, what's it all about?
Yeah, well, I mean, DSR's got a proud history we should talk about.
Yeah.
They've been around 55 years. The first two Paralympians who went to Rome in 1960, Bruno Moretti and Kevin Coombs, actually created a club called the Paravic Sports Club to try and promote and support wheelchair athletes. And so that ended up becoming Wheelchair Sports Victoria, and we ran all the wheelchair sporting programs in Victoria. But as that's become more mainstream within sport, we've evolved to an organisation that's Disability Sport and Recreation. So we still run the sport of wheelchair rugby, we're heavily involved with the sport of wheelchair AFL, but we're more of a broader organisation seeking to enhance the capability of other organisations to get involved and support people with disability, to be involved in sport. So we do a whole range of sector events, such as an awards program, a big festival in December around International Day of People with Disability, lots of community education and awareness programs, camps for kids, a library, an NDA sports guide. So there's a range of things that we do to try and improve the whole sector,
Right.
and also help individuals where we can to basically get them on the path of being more active.
Right. So you're working with people with disability to help them sort of be more active, but you do a bit of community education. So talk a bit about the schools work that you do.
Yeah, so we think we understand that community attitudes and awareness is one of the biggest barriers to participation. So we've got a disability awareness program that we reach 20,000 kids every year.
Wow.
So we've got a team of presenters who are all with a lived experience of disability, and they go out to a school. They'll tell their life story about what might have happened to them, what their life's been living with a disability, the power of sport and how sport has helped them change their life, and how sport has enabled them to live their life to their potential. And then we take it beyond just the stories, and we have a trailer of wheelchairs that we take with us to the school and they play a game of either wheelchair basketball or wheelchair AFL. So the kids get to have an experiential activity where they get a taste about what a disability sport might be like.
Right.
And the feedback that we get from the kids is extraordinary, and from the teachers. They tell us that this is just talked about and discussed in their classrooms for weeks and weeks afterwards.
Yeah.
So it's really profound, the outcomes that we can deliver through that. But importantly, we also give the presenters some employment, some really, respectful work, and for them to be able to tell their story. In some ways, it really helps their mental health, that they can actually have an opportunity of being able to tell others about what they've been through.
Yep.
But to tell them about the positive aspects of their life with a disability. It's not all about deficit, it's about what you can do. So we can really promote that message, and that's a core part of what we're trying to do with that education piece. And it's really well involved with schools now, but we're trying to develop now a corporate version of it. So we're really interested in taking this into the corporate space, because there's so many lessons of resilience and goal setting and reaching your potential and grit that would be very powerful for a business to actually learn from, and for their staff to learn from. So any businesses out there that are wanting to work with us on that,
There you go.
we're really interested to talk to
There
you.
you go. Well, we love all that, those aims and ambitions and the efforts you're making there, and are similarly active in some of those same spaces. We have schools come in here and sort of talk to us and see what we do. Some of those schools have asked us to come back and be engaged in wheelchair basketball.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah,
I sat
yeah.
down in one. I played a little bit of basketball, and I thought, oh yeah, I can handle that. It is super tough. You've
Yeah, of
given that a
course.
try.
Well, I played wheelchair football.
Okay,
I can tell you
right.
that story if you want.
Come on, yes.
Yeah, well, from way back, originally, this sport of wheelchair AFL, which people might have heard of.
Yes.
At the moment, there's 5 AFL clubs playing in a state-based competition.
Yes.
So you've got Collingwood, Hawthorn, Richmond, Essendon and St Kilda, who are
Yes.
involved with Wallara, which
Yes.
is fantastic. So they're playing in a state-based competition with a grand final, and they're all representing the Jumpers, and it's all absolutely fantastic.
Yes.
But 3 years ago, it didn't exist.
Right.
The sport wasn't even, there was 0 players in Victoria.
Right.
So we got asked by our national organisation, which is Disability Sport Australia, who had developed the sport in conjunction with the Defence Force.
Yes.
Can you enter a team in the national championships? And they're going to be in Melbourne in about 6 weeks' time.
Is this, but before we continue on with that, is Prince Harry involved in this?
Well, that was where it originally started
Because
from.
I've teased the viewers.
Yeah,
I've
okay,
thrown out
okay.
Prince Harry, so let's go back
Okay,
to
the
that.
Prince Harry story. So
Yes.
you might have remembered that he was stationed in Darwin for a while as
Okay.
part of his national service.
Before Meghan Markle and that whole
Oh
thing.
yeah,
He
yeah,
was
yeah,
way
yeah.
back,
He was a
okay.
bit of the playboy back then,
Oh, okay,
probably.
right.
But he was involved and the Defence Force were trialling this new sport because they had an idea of creating a sport for returned soldiers
Okay.
to play something in a wheelchair that allowed them to actually play a sport that they might not have been able to play previously. So they were mucking around with rules and how's it going to work, and is a handball, how do you score, how do you play football when you can't actually kick?
Right.
So it's essentially it's a handball game on a basketball court.
Yeah.
And so they're playing around with the rules, and they needed to do some demonstration games. And the Darwin Soldier Recovery Centre, I think it was called, they were heavily involved with it. And so Prince Harry, while he was stationed there, he actually played a couple of games
Okay.
to get a taste for it. And so it was through not just through his connection, but through the work that Disability Sport Australia did with the Defence Force.
Okay.
They developed the sport, and then they came to us and said, okay, you need a Victorian team in the national championships.
How long did you have to put that together?
Like I said, about 6 weeks. And so no one even knew about the sport. So it was like, how do you find players? How do you even explain the rules? It didn't make
Yes,
sense.
yes.
And we just thought it was a bit stupid, to be honest. It just didn't seem like it had any legs, for want of a better word.
Yes.
And we were talking to old ex-wheelchair basketballers to get them involved, and none of them wanted to do it. And we coerced, and we ended up getting about 7 people involved to give it a try.
Yeah.
And we needed a squad of 10, and I said, okay, well, I'll put my hand up, because able-bodied people can play
Yes,
together.
yes.
So it's a really great inclusion
Yes.
sport. So I put my hand up and hopped in one of our equipment loan library wheelchairs and just learned how to play.
Okay.
And then I've been playing it for 3 years. I've retired now, but was playing up until last year. And so I know full well how hard it is to play, but
Right.
also I knew full well the enjoyment that you can get out of it
Right.
and the amazing outcomes. So
Right.
it's been one of those incredible sports.
And then tell us a bit about the captain of the Saints team, because I
Yeah.
understand all of that has led to some other interesting roles and developments.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the great outcomes from the sport that we really didn't envisage was going to happen so quickly
Yeah.
is that all the clubs now, they actually employ their team captain to work within the club at least one day every fortnight, working on inclusion programs.
Yeah.
And Marcus Sander, who's the captain of St Kilda, So he's been helping with them with not only the wheelchair football team, but also some other inclusion and community programs that St Kilda do, and some of them are in partnership with Wallara, which are absolutely fantastic. So one of them is like a Saints Play, which is an Auskick specific program to get everyone involved in being able to try some sort of version of football.
Yep.
And through that, we're able to get one of the participants to actually learn about some of the other DSR programs, including some of our camps.
Yep.
So I've actually had a little girl called Sage who's actually gone on our winter camp recently, and now she's about to do our winter camp in July, where she's going to go to Falls Creek and have an on the snow experience.
Wow.
All through these connections that's been made by these clubs opening up their world to a whole world of inclusion, and having a staff member day in, day out within the office. They're starting to raise a whole number of questions about access and accommodation, and how do you accommodate a person with disability in the work environment. So these 5 AFL clubs, they're all learning their own stories along the way about how do you better accommodate and work with people with disability, and also looking at their members, how do they help more of their members who have a disability to attend games.
Yeah.
And now you're seeing autism-specific rooms being opened up at Geelong and Hawthorn, I think, have got one.
Yes.
The whole world of disability is just opening up, and we're really excited about what's possible in the future. We're only the tip of the iceberg at the moment.
I agree. The footy clubs are really embracing this, and sport's such a powerful force for change. Of course, we know that. So like you, we get really excited at seeing those major social leaders, embrace us. I mean, as you know, we pick and pack and ship merchandise out for Hawthorn and soon some other clubs. Ben, on our team today, works part-time down at the Saints, don't you, Ben?
Sure do.
In their media room, so he's editing videos and things, and the
Fantastic.
Saints have asked us, there's some other roles that they've asked us can we fill, so that is very exciting. Now, I want to you said Falls Creek, I want to talk about the snow and some of the things that you do, because there's some great stories there. But first, can we just touch on this idea that whether it's the Paralympic Games or the different programs that you run, and the idea that, well, it's just we should all be one. We should just have one system and one school and one program. That's what inclusion is about. Why do we need to run all these different things, Richard, in your view? Because there's lots of different programs that are running. Women in footy is a big issue at the moment, isn't it? There's a lot of attention on change rooms and funding and money and everything.
Yeah.
How does disability fit into that, and what do you think is the right mix of all that?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of questions within that.
Yeah, there is, isn't it?
I'll tackle the women one first. And so everyone's aware of a really big focus of state government funding and effort and intensity around supporting women in sport, which is absolutely fantastic. I've got 3 daughters. I've been involved with supporting women's football programs and coached, and so it's just fantastic the work that the government's been doing in that space, and that's been in response to a gap in participation for women, and that's what you hope governments do. They see a gap and they invest resources. So we would argue that there's actually a much bigger gap for participation for people with disability. So hang on, there's a big gap for people with disability. Let's have some unique and specialist programs around disability, and almost an office for disability sport, because there's an office for women's sport. Maybe that it's time to really look into this next area of inclusion and say, well, it's disability sports time now. Let's invest some serious investment, and the government has been investing to a certain amount, and so I congratulate them for that. But it's time to take it to the next level and to really do something significant, and really create some change, because there's a massive demand for change that's out there, and a massive demand for participation. I'll just take back I'll get back to the other story in a minute. But the Australian Sports Commission did some research in 2009, and they showed that 75% of people with disability who are active want to do more. Great. 83% of people who are inactive, they want to become active. So there's this huge unmet demand of people with disability who either aren't active or are active and want to do more, to do more. And so what we need is a sector, a sporting sector, environments, physical facilities, equipment, to be able to cope with that demand. And with the NDIS, as that rolls out, participants' aspirations are going to be increasing. They'll say, well, hang on, what's the best life that I can live? And people's best life includes being physically active, because that's a right of everybody. So as those aspirations increase and the demand increases, there's a million Victorians with disability, there's this huge demand thing that's coming over the hill. We need more investment to be able to make sure that sport and leisure environments and the whole society is ready and capable of servicing that demand.
Yeah. Good answer.
And what was the other thing that I was going to talk about? There was two parts to that question. I can't
Well,
remember.
it's in terms of, can we do it all, just mainstream it, do it inclusively
that's right,
in
yeah.
one program? You know, remember the Paralympic Games, and a lot of
Yeah.
people say, we should have all this inside the Olympic Games.
Yeah.
And then as we dug into that in one of these episodes with Don Elgin, we realised that, you know, when you run the 100 metres at the Paralympics, there's a whole lot of events, and they all want to compete. You know, and you couldn't physically pick up all those events and plonk it inside the Olympic Games and just have one event. So having some demonstration sports is fantastic, you know, and benefits, but you don't want to suddenly wipe things out and just to say that we've got inclusion, because sometimes we would lose valuable things from that.
Well, there's absolutely fantastic value in mainstreaming and seeing someone being part of a broader organisation. But I think there's also absolute value in being able to play a sport or to participate in something amongst your peers. I mean, sport, we all talk about a level playing field and all those sorts of things. So I think there's definitely a valid case to have specific disability sport options.
Yep.
And where possible, those options are people with disability playing within a mainstream environment. So there's a need for both, and I don't think there's the demand to have everything mainstream, I think, is too far in that direction.
Yeah.
I mean, if you take the Olympics as an example, it's just simply impossible to have the Paralympics merged in with the Olympics, because it would become completely bloated and it wouldn't be able to cater for all the different unique characteristics of people with particular
So that reaction is
disability
interesting,
types.
I think, because it's well-meaning. Oh, wouldn't it be great if we had this inside the Olympics? But in practicality, you know, it's impossible, you know, and it would mean a step backwards rather than a step forwards. So anyway, I think inclusion is an
I
issue.
think that the concept is to celebrate diversity.
Yes.
And to really, you know, make the most of celebrating the fact that we're all different in our own particular ways.
Yep.
But then having appropriate competitions and activities that are suited to those particular subgroups of society.
Now, the snow, Falls Creek. Tell us about some of the snow activities, and you shared a great story earlier. I'd love to hear that again.
Well, yeah, so there's a group called Disabled Winter Sport Australia who do a number of fantastic programs. One of the ones that we're involved with, which is at Falls Creek, staying at the YMCA Hammond's Gap facility, the camp there. So what happens is, for people who can't do traditional skiing activities, for some who either can't walk, can't use their legs, they go into what's called a sit ski, which is like a bucket that has skis underneath it, and they have a guide who will sort of steer them down the hill. And eventually, if they have enough capabilities, they can get outriggers and they can eventually get on a tether rope, and they can eventually do it themselves. But what we do is we take kids on a camp where they get their first taste of this as a on the snow experience.
So now, Ben, did you do that? Understand?
I did, yes.
Ben said, what did you think of it, Ben?
Loved it.
Loved it.
Loved it.
Okay.
Good on you,
Keep
Ben.
going, Richard.
Yeah. So I'll tell you a story of one of our participants from the first camp that I went on, which was, I think, probably 2 or 3 years ago. And there's a girl called Natalie, and she's non-verbal. She can't walk, has difficulty eating, so we had to have supported eating for her while she was there. But she went on the sit ski, and the guide is taking down the hill, and I'm actually filming it, and could see her going along at 1,000,000 miles an hour, big smile on her face. And at the end of the day, we had to sit around as a group and review the day and work out what was going to happen the next day. And we asked each participant to say, well, what did you find? How did today went? And what are you looking forward to tomorrow? Sort of a fairly basic sort of question. And Natalie communicates through a communication board, so her fingers actually aren't that stable. So she actually uses her nose to hit the keyboard and come up with what she wants to say. And when it came to her, and she hit the play button on the communication board, and the words that came out were, "Thank you for the best day of my life." And it was sort of, I get goosebumps every time I tell that story. And at that moment, and I almost felt completely privileged to be part of that experience that was able to give someone the best day of their life. And not only the best single day, but she's now gone on the camp a number of times. We've had a chance to talk to her mother about what life changes it made in her whole outlook on life. And it's dramatic. And so not many people can go to work knowing that they're making significant and profound life changes to people with the work that you do. So that's one of the things that drives me, and I would encourage anyone who's a bit wary of disability sport and what it can do. Once you get a taste of it, once it's in your bloodstream, you almost... I can't see myself ever working in another space, because it's just so profound the outcomes that you get to be a part of.
Yes.
And you can help people, and they tell you all sorts of stories about what difference that has made in their life, whether they're going to be alive or dead, whether they have a life, whether they have a sense of purpose. And I'm not making these things up. I've done this by integrating myself in a number of different activities.
Yes.
And people will tell you these stories. So that's exciting, but it's also frustrating because you can see what potential there is for change
Yes.
to such a large part of the society that we're holding back because we haven't got the right systems and the right funding and the right resources to allow this huge part of the population, 1.1 million Victorians, to get the benefits of being active
Yeah.
that everyone else is entitled to. So
Well, on that size of the population, as we talk a bit about here, for every person living directly with that disability that you just mentioned, inside that group, there are 2 or 3 or 4 people, affected indirectly by that.
Yeah.
Family members,
Exactly.
whatever, so
Yeah.
the ripple effect of that change, for that million is felt across, 3, 4, 5 million, so the multiplier effect is really important. So whether you're living directly with a disability or indirectly affected by, people are surprised at the size of the community. Yeah.
what's all about, I had a chat with a gentleman during the week who's involved with a vision school, and he was talking about for his daughter who has vision difficulties. He wants the school environment to create a person who's 25 years of age, who's capable, independent and confident about attacking the world with their best capabilities.
Yeah.
And so we need to create a system that develops confidence and develops skills and functionality within people so they can live their best life possible. And sport and recreation plays a key role in that.
It sure does. It sure does. All right. Now, what's coming up for you for the next for DSR for the next few months as you look ahead for your calendar?
Well, every month is a busy period of time. But we've got our camp coming up in July.
Yep.
We've got the second season of our wheelchair rugby program. We run the sport of wheelchair rugby
Right.
in Victoria. And
That's rough.
it's rough, yeah.
Whew.
It's rough, but
They
it's a
collide
fantastic
into each
sport.
other. I see people
Yeah.
sprawling everywhere. I think you'd better go one day.
Yeah, we actually just had Victorian program. 7 of the 12 Australians are from Victoria,
Oh,
so
wow. Okay.
we like to say we're the
Okay,
best state
good.
in Australia.
Right, we're the best.
Yeah. But we actually had the first female who actually represented Australia in the Steelers team 3 weeks ago at a tournament in the States, a lady called Shay Graham.
Okay.
So we're really proud of that. I mean,
Sure.
rugby's one of those sports internationally you can have females playing alongside males. So she's the first Australian female that's made it to the Australian team. So the second
That's
season of that's
inclusion.
coming up. Yeah, absolutely. And the Wheelchair AFL program continues to roll out at Burundara Sports Centre
And
is
a
where
big
it's held.
festival coming up, I think.
Yeah,
It's
one
in
of our
December.
biggest events of the year is the Disability Sport and Recreation Festival
Yep.
on International Day of People with Disability, December the 3rd.
Yep.
And we do it out front of Crown Riverwalk. There's a nice big flat open space there. And we have about 40 to 50 exhibitors who come along, different sports, different equipment providers, different support organisations, to have a little stand, and then people with disability can come along for the day and learn all about how do you find another sport or find an activity. But importantly, we do it in a very public space as well, so that people who are walking past, it's a very prominent space on South Bank, and thousands of people get to see, probably for the most of them, a disability sport happening and being demonstrated for the first ever time.
Yep.
And it's part of that whole big issue that we're talking about raising community understanding and awareness that people with disability have the right to be able to play sport just as much as anyone else does.
Cool. Well, we'll be there. Now, we do have a question that's come in from someone, so thank you. And keep pressing like and hope you're enjoying this. So, if you had a magic wand, Richard, what would you change? So, you work hard at all this. You talked about the wave of demand and the frustrations. What would you change out there, Richard?
Well, I think one of the biggest issues is community attitudes.
Yep.
And one of the first things that we'd really love to have is a huge community awareness program about disability. And we sometimes talk to the Office for Disability and we say, well, we're about the sexy side of disability. We're about people reaching their potential, doing the most with what they've got, and really celebrating their life in their most capable way possible. So if we had a public awareness campaign that really celebrated all these outcomes that are possible and really raised the understanding of the broader community, then they can be more accepting of people with disability, not just in sport, but in employment and in a whole range of other settings, because it's all raising the concept about someone with disability can do amazing things, and how do you adapt and modify your programs to be able to support them? And I read a really great article the other day about the NDIS and how the NDIS, a great analogy, is a tree with fruit growing on that tree that creates great outcomes for people with disability. But it can only happen within the soil that the tree grows in. And the whole of community and their attitudes is that soil. And that soil can either be fertile or it can be barren. So a really great awareness program will make that soil as fertile as possible to support people with disability and to support change in the way that workplaces are, the way sporting environments are, to create an environment that people can make the most of the NDIS and make the most of people being able to ultimately, as what we're all about, living their best life possible.
Well, we support that. I want to read that article, so please send it to me. But we agree wholeheartedly. And that's what these shows are about. I know you are producing little video stories, and we're all trying to get out there and sort of spread the word and raise awareness and educate people. So the more we can do that, the more that we find people. Because there's a lot of people out there who want to engage with us. They're a bit nervous about what to say. They don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't want to offend somebody. So if we can help those people just move along the path, then suddenly you've got a whole lot more supporters out there and opportunities, and that would change the world.
Yeah. Well, there was some research done in South Australia a few years ago within the sporting community, and asked that exact question. Do you feel like you're capable to actually work with people with disability to get them involved in sporting programs, and what do you think you need? And overwhelmingly, the volunteer says, well, we'd love to do it, but we don't know what to do. We're going to say the wrong thing. We're going to put our foot in it. We're going to embarrass ourselves, or we're going to embarrass the client. So the default position is, I won't do anything. So there needs to be a whole campaign about, how do you ask the right questions? How do you modify your activity? How do you just basically bring people into the tent of being able to get involved? And the demand's there, the will is there, but the resources and the skills and the training activities, there's elements of it that's out there, but it needs to be coordinated more to make it easier for everyone to take that step.
There you go. So we'll join you in that effort.
Yeah,
together.
fantastic.
We'll see what we can do. I hope you've enjoyed that, everyone, today. Sport, of course, is the number one thing about Australia, really iconic, across our country. Disability and sport is an important interface. The footy clubs, there's so much drivers of social change that can happen inside sport. Richard's one of the leaders driving all that. It's been great to have you as our guest today, Richard.
Thanks,
Thank
Phil.
you.
Can I just mention our website, www.dsr.org.au,
Yes.
and we're a charity as well, so we exist with the support of the community and its donations, and with businesses who come on board and support us and sponsor us. So we get less than 10% of our money from the government. So we need help to continue to do the good work that we do.
There you go. Well, they're a great organisation, and thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next week with another special guest.
Don't wait for tomorrow.